Hi guys, welcome to Learn Tech from Zero. Today we will be starting the course CCNA. CCNA is a very useful course if you want to get into IT, because if you can get CCNA certified, which means you will learn about networking, how does internet works, how does communication happen, and also you can learn a lot of cybersecurity concepts. So CCNA is a really useful course, and you don't even have to get certified. Just follow me and learn the foundations and the fundamentals of networking and how devices work in the internet or networking level, and you can learn a lot of information like technology concepts which can help you in the long run. So let's just start with CCNA. So there is a new course out. It was out last year, I think around December time, and this will stay around for another 3 to 4 years. So let's just start with the topic. So the first topic is network fundamentals. So explain the role and function of network components, and the first one is router. So today we will be discussing the role and function of a router. You can find all the information, everything associated to CCNA and all the topics on the website. You can also find them on YouTube and other social media platforms. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So let's just start with routers. So what is a router? A router is a device that connects different networks together. It looks at the destination IP address inside a packet. It decides where to send the packet next. Without a router, devices in different networks or subnets cannot communicate. So what it means is, so router when a network wants to send an information to a different network, like for example, if you want to send a message, um, or if you want to watch a video on YouTube, right? You send a packet to the router, and the router checks the destination IP address, and then it will send it to the YouTube. And when the YouTube sends it back, the packet, the data will consist of your IP address, where the router will check the IP address and sends it to you. So router communicates using IP address. So communication within a network, to like internal network. For example, you might have two or three internal network like that you create within your work or home environment. It might sound a bit tricky, but I will cover everything in details. So keep following me, and we will cover all the IT concepts. So just to give you a general overview of how a router works is, you need IP addressing to communicate between two different networks. So your home network, though you are sitting at home, and all the devices, all the phones, all the computers and everything within before your broadband router, right, is a network. And for example, YouTube controlling all the servers, everything, so they have a separate network. So you communicating with YouTube and YouTube communicating back to you is two different networks, and you need a router for that. If you communicate within you, like for example, uh, I think we should not get into that topic because it will complicate today's topic. Let's just keep it simple because we will cover more complicated topics later on. So a router is needed to communicate between two networks. So you are in one network, and if your friend might be in a different city or it might be a different place, and for you guys to communicate, you guys need routers. So that's what all means from the first section. what does a router do? It connects networks. So I've just explained to you. So example, connects your school network to the internet. So for example, for if you're in a school, right, or if you're in an education environment, if you want to communicate, if you want to do some research, if you want to read some articles on Wikipedia, you will need a router, because the Wikipedia is based on a different network, and for you to access its information you need a router. So a router works in IP addressing layer, so where all the communication happens using IP addresses. And another example is connects buildings A network to a building B network. So it's like this is where we're talking about two internal networks. If you're not sure, if you don't understand what I'm about to say right now, don't worry about it. But for example, in a private network, you might have two or three separate LANs. For example, let me just give you an example. Like in a small business environment, there might be three separate LANs, even though they are all private LAN within that network, but there might be three separate LANs, so the communication is separate. They're not interfering with each other. Like for example, in your work environment, there might be a separate LAN for your management information. There might be a separate LAN for staff. There might be a separate LAN for guests. So when guests use internet, they are not interfering with your communication, or they're not interfering with the management communication. So you can create separate LANs, and for you, like for example, you might be in the management, or you might be in the guest LAN, or you might be in the staff LAN, and for you to communicate with different LANs, like if a guest want to send a message to the management, you need a router for that communication. We will cover this in details later on, but don't worry about it too much. I think this is called VLAN, subnetting, and we will cover them in the later videos. Path selection. The router checks its routing table. So it connects networks, and the next is path selection. So the router checks its routing table. If there are many possible paths, it chooses the best path. This can be done with static routes or dynamic routing protocols, OSPF, EIGRP, RIP, BGP. I know it sounds, if you're new to this, it might sound very tricky, but I will just show you right now how it works. So for example, it says router chooses the best path selection. The router checks its routing table. So let me just give you a quick overview of how this works. For example, okay, let's just go through it again. So the router checks its routing table. So within a router, that device, there is a table. So it collects information, and it collects information, and it would know how to route the information. Like for example, when you want to access YouTube, the router will check the routing table, and then it will find the best way to reach YouTube. There are many possible paths. It will choose the best one. And there are static routes. So there could be static routes. It's basically when you manually set the routes, like you tell the router how they need to communicate to YouTube. Or you can use dynamic protocols, like dynamic routing protocols, where you don't choose or you don't do it manually. The protocols will figure out how to reach to different networks. So let me just quickly show you how this works. So I am inside a router. You don't need to know how I'm doing this. You will find it out later on. I'm just quickly show you. So you can connect a router in various ways. Let's just assume I'm using one of those methods to connect. So I'm inside a router. Let's just say I'm inside your workplace router. So that router communicates with the internet, and you are connected to the router. So I'm just going to check the routing table of that router. So normally you just enable the router, and then I will just go into the configuration. So for example, just to check what sort of table, the routing table the router has, I'm just going to choose show IP route. I'm just going to click on that, and you can see this is the router. So these are the routes available in the router. So the router will follow these IP addresses to communicate to different networks. You don't need to know too much in details right now because we are just covering the concept of router. We will go through every single thing in details. Just make sure to give me a follow or subscribe if possible. So for example here it says C means it's connected directly. So um, this network, like this could be a separate network, is connected to the router directly. Don't worry about this, it might sound a bit technical. Don't worry about this one now. So there are different routes available on the routing table, and it says there are connected routing tables and there are some local routing um, uh, route sorry, there are local routes, and you can configured those routes. Like for example, a router to work, it has to follow the routing table. You can configure them statically where you manually do that. Like you, for example, you can actually manually do a route like this, like IP route, and then you put the IP addresses of how it should route and stuff like that. We will cover all of them in detail. So this is how it works. You can either manually set up the routing table if you're a network engineer, or you can use protocols. Most of the time, there are the engineers, they use protocols to get the IP routes. So we will cover those sort of things in details later on. So don't worry about it now. So that's the path selection. Inter VLAN routing. So inter VLAN routing is like, let's just say you work for a company, and you will have separate networks to for the concept of having a secure workplace, for the concept of your um, business or workplace getting hacked and stuff like that. People use VLAN. We will cover that later on. So you basically create separate networks within your existing network. So you have a private network. Like, let's just use your home example. So your home is kind of everything, your phone, your computer, and everything is connected to the router, right? So that's one network. So that's like one private LAN. You can actually create multiple virtual LANs so that you can keep the traffic separate. And this is what called VLAN. And what's inter VLAN routing? It means for you to communicate between those two, like different private networks within your existing network, you would need a router, because all these different places, all these different areas will have different IP addresses, and a router communicates over IP addresses. So inter VLAN routing means, I'll just use the previous example. A business workplace has a management area, a guest area, a staff area. For them to communicate with each other, that process is called inter VLAN routing, and you need a router for this inter VLAN routing, for communication between different VLANs or subnets. You can also achieve this with a switch. You need a layer 3 switch, but we will cover that in the next video. Don't worry about it now. It also Router also covers security and filtering. So routers use ACL, which is known as access control list, to block and allow and block traffic. So with router, you can basically block IP addresses. You can block port numbers. You can block protocols and stuff like that. So with router, for example, you can say, if anybody, let's just say, for example, if anybody wants to access YouTube, and you want to block the YouTube for that person, you can use ACL. Like you can insert the YouTube's IP address on the router's ACL to block access to YouTube. So that's what it's all about: security and filtering. Don't worry about it for now, because ACL, we will cover it later on. The CCNA covers everything about basic internet networking and everything else. So we will literally cover everything that you don't understand. We will cover every single topic in details. And then you have NAT. So you have NAT, which is a network address translation. So routers can hide private IP addresses behind one public IP. This is how home and school networks access the internet. So what this means is, for example, you know, if you're using a home, let's just say you are at home, right? Your home network represented by only one public IP address. So, for example, when you communicate to YouTube, right? The YouTube server will not know every single IP addresses within your home network. Like for example, you might be communicating using your mobile, you might be communicating using your computer, you might be communicating using a different tablet. So every single device will have separate IP addresses, but YouTube will not memorize or keep a record of every single IP addresses of your home network. The whole area is represented using one public IP address. When you go on Google, and like you can just go on Google right now and you can type what's my IP address, and you will find your public IP address. That IP address represents everything about your network. It doesn't represent its individual devices. And NAT is one of the features within that router that keeps track of all your private IP addresses, all those separate IP addresses. And for example, when YouTube sends a response back, your router will figure out who is it for, and then it will send it to that person. So to understand NAT, you need to know what's private IP address and what's public IP address. I will cover that later on again, but there are already existing videos on TikTok and other social platforms, and even on our YouTube, so you can learn about public and private IP addresses. So NAT, network address translation, they translate all, they basically do all these. You don't have to worry about too much now. Just do some research about public and private IP addresses. So let me just, so here are some quick just a quick like some pictures to explain you the routers. Like for example, this is a home router. So you will have some ports, like switch ports like this within your home router, maybe 3 or 4, but that's a home router. This is not a proper enterprise level router, but this is just a general router. Let's just say normally a router will have a connection, and then you can connect a lot of devices, like, and those you can connect your devices directly to the router, or you connect switches to the router, and then you connect all your end devices to the switch. So this is just a quick overview of the routers in general, so don't worry too much. So that's a network. I think it might be a bit complicated for now. So when you understand a more networking and internet concepts later on, you should be able to figure this all out. I will explain you everything. And then we have just an overview of a simple network diagram. So for example, all these devices are connected to a switch, and then the switch is connected to the router, and the router gives connection to the internet. You need a router to connect outside to the internet and to get replies back to your local area network. So router is mainly for connection between external networks and even internal networks, if you have separate networks within your internal networks. Don't worry about it now. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and I will make sure that I explain it to you. So where does it work at? It works at the layer 3 of the OSI model. So I have also provided other videos about OSI model. So OSI model is a conceptual model, and it shows you how devices communicate with each other. So you need to understand OSI model to actually understand how internet works, how communication works. So there are 7 layers, and then router is in the layer 3. So it's compared to switch is in layer 2, and then router uses IP addresses, and switches, they use MAC addresses. So your device has a MAC address. These are like built-in addresses from before. These are not IP addresses. Those MAC addresses are configured from your brand. So if you check your like a mobile phone or computer or laptop, you will find MAC addresses, built-in MAC addresses from before. So router, they communicate using IP addresses, switches, they communicate using MAC addresses, and the purpose of the router is to connect different networks. I have explained it to you. And the purpose of the switch is to connect different devices in the same network. Like for example, if you have a switch within your home network, you can use the switch to communicate between different devices. You wouldn't even need to have a router to communicate. Like for example, if you want to communicate from your computer to your mobile phone and it's in the same network, you can actually communicate from your computer to your mobile without a router. You wouldn't even need to have internet connection. And then router, LAN to internet. And example, don't worry about this example, it's going to confuse you. All right, so facts to remember for CCNA. For router works at layer 3. There are 7 layers. It's at the layer 3. It uses IP addresses for decisions. So uses IP addresses. Anything to do with IP addresses, it's layer 3 router. Anything to do with IP addressing is router. And also switch, layer 3 switch does that as well, but we will cover that later on. But for now, anything to do with IP addresses is router. It has a routing table, so inside the router it has table, and the router will follow those tables to to allow the communication to occur. Like for example, it will check how to communicate with different networks using that routing table I have showed you previously when I went inside the router. Can do static routing or dynamic routing. You can do manually, you can configure those routing, or you can use protocols to configure those routings. We will cover that later on. There are several protocols, but OSPF is one of the most common routing protocols that everybody uses. And then it provides inter-VLAN routing, which I have explained to you. You might have different, like for example, let's just say you went to the airport, right? And then there is a guest internet. Let's forget about airport. You went to, let's say, Starbucks, Costa Coffee. They give you access to internet. That internet is separated from their main communication, because anyone can literally get a network monitoring tool, right? And they can study that network. So for them to study and monitor that network, so this is why you need to create separate networks within your existing network. So there is no chance of hacking. There is no chance of someone else trying to check what you are doing in a different network. So inter-VLAN routing is, I've already explained to you, you will have separate networks within a private network, and for those different private networks to communicate with each other, you need inter-VLAN routing. We will cover that later on. I've explained to you NAT, where you only get one IP address. You know, your home network, your router, it has just one IP address, which is a public IP address. But for what it normally does is it will use private IP addresses to assign you private IP addresses for all your different devices in your network, and then all the communication will happen using the public IP address. And when you get a response back, you get to your public IP address, and the router breaks it down for you and uses the private IP address to deliver the message to your phone or computer. So network address translation is another topic that we will cover. ACL is for blocking IP addresses and ports, and also you need one connection, wide area network connection. So when you're communicating with other networks in the internet, that's wide area network. So WAN, anything in the internet is called wide WAN connection. So if they're in the wide area network, there's a lot of a combination of different networks is called internet. So that's WAN. Okay, let's just do different networks. VLAN subnets need a router. This is a bit advanced for this now. I've already explained to you, so we will not go any further. So I think this is enough for now. So a router is just a normal networking device. It uses IP addresses, It uses IP addresses for communication, and you need a router to communicate outside your private network, and you need to communicate with people or different networks outside your private network. So you need a router to communicate to the internet. And yeah, I think that's it for now. If you have any questions, make sure to send me a comment, or you can go to our website and use the contact form to send me a message. And I don't have any official email address yet, but very soon there will be a new email address on our website. So if you have any questions or anything, just leave a comment and I will get back to you. So that's it for now, and make sure you give me a follow or subscribe, and stay tuned, and we will be covering the next topic, which will be, bear with me 1 second, the next one will be layer 2 and layer 3 switch. That will be the next topic, and this video will be out very soon. Thank you for your time.